Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. One of the most misunderstood parts of retrogrades isn't the retrograde itself, but the shadow period that surrounds it. This is why people often say, Mercury retrograde hasn't started yet, but everything already feels off. Or why they expect instant relief the moment a planet stations direct as in stops moving forward and are confused when things still feel unsettled. Shadow periods explain why retrogrades work gradually rather than suddenly, and why planetary cycles unfold in stages instead of on a single date. Before a planet officially goes retrograde, it enters what's known as the pre-shadow period. This begins when the planet first reaches the degree it will later retrograde back to, sometimes weeks or even months before the retrograde station depending on the planet. A retrograde station is the moment a planet appears to stop moving before it changes direction in the sky. There are two kinds of retrograde stations. The first one is a station retrograde that happens right before a planet goes retrograde. The planet slows down, appears to pause, and then begins moving backward through the zodiac. This marks the start of the retrograde phase energetically speaking. Even though the planet hasn't been retrograde for long yet, this station is often when people notice the shift most strongly because everything feels stalled, heightened, or tense. The second type of retrograde station is called station direct. This happens right before a planet goes direct again. The planet slows down, appears to pause, and then resumes forward motion. This marks the end of the retrograde phase, but not the end of the story. Momentum starts returning here, but the planet still has to move through the post-shadow degrees before the cycle is complete. During the pre-shadow, themes are introduced quietly and often indirectly. You may encounter a conversation that feels unfinished, a decision that doesn't quite sit right, a delay that seems minor, or a situation that creates subtle tension without fully revealing why. At this stage, most people don't recognize these moments as important because nothing appears urgent or disruptive yet. The key function of the pre-shadow is introduction rather than disruption. It shows you where your attention will eventually be required even if you're not ready to deal with it yet. Many people dismiss pre-shadow events as coincidences or temporary annoyances only to realize later that these were the first signals of a larger pattern. The pre-shadow doesn't demand action. It plants the seed and sets the storyline in motion. Here's an example. Let's say Mercury will retrograde in Gemini later this month. During the pre-shadow, you might send an email or text that feels fine at the time, but something about it nags at you afterward. Maybe you realize you didn't explain yourself clearly, or you forgot to include an important detail. Nothing blows up yet, so you shrug it off and move on. Weeks later, during the actual retrograde, that same conversation comes back. The person misunderstood you, the topic needs to be revisited, or the issue resurfaces and now requires clarification. Looking back, you realize the pre-shadow moment was the first signal that communication around this topic wasn't finished. That's a pre-shadow. Not a problem yet, just a preview. Another pre-shadow example is a Venus relationship-based issue. Before Venus goes retrograde, you might reconnect briefly with someone from your past. Maybe through a casual message, a social media interaction, or even a passing thought. It feels insignificant, like a random moment or a memory surfacing for no reason. During the Venus retrograde, that person reappears more fully, or the emotional theme tied to them resurfaces. You're now asked to reflect on relationship patterns, values, or unresolved feelings. Later, you realize that the pre-shadow interaction was the first hint that this chapter wasn't fully closed. The pre-shadow didn't demand action. It planted the emotional seed. When the planet stations retrograde, those same themes return, but with greater clarity and pressure. What was once easy to ignore becomes difficult to avoid. Conversations resurface. Decisions need reconsideration, and unresolved issues demand review. Retrogrades don't create new problems out of nowhere. They expose what was already forming beneath the surface. This is why retrogrades are often experienced as reflective, repetitive, or emotionally charged rather than purely chaotic. They slow momentum so awareness can catch up. After the planet stations direct, many people expect the process to be over, but this is another common misunderstanding. Stationing direct marks a shift in direction, not completion. Once the planet begins moving forward again, it enters the post-shadow period, retracing the same degrees for the final time. This phase is about integration and resolution. Insights gained during the retrograde start to settle, decisions begin to stick, and forward movement slowly returns, but with more clarity than before. An example of this is as follows. During Mercury retrograde, you may have had repeated miscommunications with a coworker or client. Emails went back and forth, details were unclear, and decisions kept getting postponed. When Mercury stations direct, the confusion starts to ease, but nothing is instantly resolved. You still need follow-up conversations, clarifications, or revisions. As Mercury moves through the post-shadow, those same conversations happen again, but this time they land differently. Everyone is clearer, agreements finally stick, and the issue no longer keeps reopening. Looking back, you can see that the retrograde brought awareness, but the post-shadow is where the situation stabilized and moved forward. That's post-shadow. It's not dramatic. It's just quietly functional again. Here's another example. During a Mars retrograde, motivation may have stalled. Efforts felt blocked, energy was inconsistent, or pushing forward only created more resistance. When Mars stations direct, energy begins to return, but progress still feels cautious. As Mars moves through the post-shadow degrees, confidence rebuilds. You re-engage the same goals, but with better strategy and awareness. Actions feel aligned instead of forced. The frustration fades because you're no longer repeating the same ineffective approach. The retrograde changed how you act. The post-shadow lets you act on it. Relief usually comes during the post-shadow, not on the station itself. This is because the planet must fully clear the degrees it revisited in order for the cycle to complete. Once it moves beyond the final retrograde degree, energy shifts forward into new territory, and the tension associated with the retrograde begins to dissolve. Progress feels more natural, momentum stabilizes, and the lessons of the cycle can finally be applied. Shadow periods show us that astrology doesn't operate in isolated moments, but in layered processes. Retrogrades are not random disruptions or punishments. They are slow revelations designed to bring awareness, correction, and integration over time. When you understand shadow periods, retrogrades stop feeling confusing and start to make sense as part of a larger developmental cycle. In the next videos, we'll explore how retrogrades express differently by sign and by house, because where a retrograde lands in the chart shapes how these cycles are experienced just as much as when they occur. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you found this video helpful.